Mortis Maledictum is a cosmic dark fantasy story, and as such may contain content not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Now, enjoy the show.
Shock jock vocals played over the bomber's cheap radio. That mixture of hate and humor churned in her head like a cheap gin. Emily immediately switched it off. It brought back too many memories of that place, of Dad. She'd left there years ago, packing up everything she owned in a shitty wood-paneled wagon and heading for the highway. She hadn't made it far, though, maybe a few states, before the calls started. Emily didn't know how Mom had found her. Frankly, that magic was just how the old woman worked. She knew people and she knew how to make them talk. Emily's mom could have worked for the CIA or the FBI. She was the perfect mixture of sweet and unassuming. Just the sort of person you'd be happy to share details of your day with. Mom was good that way. Too good. Emily drummed her fingers on the wheel in agitation. The wood panel wagon was gone. She sold it for rent not too long after she'd left. For a few months, that worked. Eventually, she needed new wheels and had settled on the cheap import she was presently sitting in. With rigid seats that spoke of Japanese engineering over comfort and a manual transmission that wasn't keen on second gear, the Blue Bomber wasn't really well named. You could blame her girlfriend for that. Jinx was heavy on the fun and light on the details. Big curls and a bigger personality. The girl was no end of bad news. Emily loved every minute of it, right up until the larger-than-life personality tried to gut her like a mackerel and leave her bloody blonde corpse on the bed. Jinx had decided to check herself into a completely different reality. Emily wasn't Emily anymore. She was the enemy. She was out to get her, out to destroy her life, out to infect her with gayness. In Jinx's mind, the kitchen knife would be happy to put an end to that. It had told her as much. Emily reached for the radio again, but stopped. His show might be on. She hated his show, just like she hated this place. It was the whole of it, the quiet little town with its mossy oaks and misty mornings. It was the way the sun struggled to break through the trees. It was the back alley where she kissed Marcy for the first time, and the second. It was all of that, and none of it. Emily hated this place, and she hated herself for hating it. Jinx used to say you can choose to be blessed by your past or cursed by it. Emily had told her to fuck off, but only because she was right. It wasn't hard to see what Emily had chosen. The highway opened up and the Blue Bomber let her know it wanted to run. Emily chuckled at the thought of shoving her boot to the floor. The little import would have loved it. Its engine would have whined like those bottle rockets she and Dad used to set off in the street. Dad. The old man was dying. Mom had said as much. She also made a point of reminding Emily how long it had been, and of how much he missed her. Missed me? Maybe he should have kicked me out. Emily shoved her boot to the floor, giving the bomber as much gas as it could take and enjoying the engine's whine. Emily flipped the visor down, the setting sun doing its damnedest to get in her eyes. They didn't like each other, and the mirror embedded in the back of that shade reminded her why. Emily's skin accepted the sun like those skillets her mom had bought that she'd sworn nothing could stick to. The sun didn't stick to Emily, it just burned. It always burned. There was no tan, nothing that resembled that nice butternut brown Jinx had been awarded. Her former girlfriend had won the genetic lottery. Curly hair and skin like a well-stirred coffee. She had not. Emily used to fight it. Back in high school, she tried everything. Tanning salons, bronzers, even pills that were supposed to bring out your Venetian glow. That crap made her vomit for half a day and shit the rest of it. In the end, the white girl won. Her powdery skin became just another reason for her to stick out, to get comments about needing sun, and to spend most of her life in her room listening to CDs of goth bands whose bitchy vocals spoke to her soul. What soul she still had. The Blue Bomber rumbled over a rough patch of highway, buzzing her seat and reminding her to focus on the horizon and not on those fair cheeks. Those fair cheeks that had come from Dad. Dad. Part of her wanted to call him by his real name. The rest of her wanted to yank the wheel and send that little Japanese import through the tall grass and back the way she'd come. Hell, she'd even accept the toll authorities' max penalty. She didn't do it, though. She didn't pull the wheel and she didn't run. Not this time. 6 miles. She wasn't sure why she said it out loud. She just did. Being a car, the bomber didn't answer back. It was just Emily. It was always just Emily. Maybe that's how it's meant to be. She stretched out and put a hand on the shifter, her fingers absently twisting around one of Jinx's hairbands. I could use a little of your strength, sweetie. Jinx's strength had turned out to be more than Emily had bargained for. The girl had broken 2 noses before they got in her wagon, and scratched the shit out of a 3rd before they hauled that sexy bitch to the hospital. Emily needed some of that heart now, even if it was just to break the old man's nose. Maybe I could do it twice. Emily let that pleasant thought take her into the next exit ramp and through the toll plaza. She'd got most of the quarters in the basket on her first toss. Most, but not all. She learned long ago to throw more than you need and expect some to get stuck. That was life. Always expect something to get stuck. Expect to be one of those quarters that waffled on the sides of a basket a little too long. Expect to get called back by mom. Expect your old man to be dying and want to see your stupid white ass one last time. The blue bomber paused at the light, the little import's engine running rough and neutral. Emily knew how it felt. She was running rough now and reached out to pop on the radio. No sooner had its words hit her than she turned it back off again. She'd have enough of that from the old man, more than enough. Home was there, just a few turns away. Dad was there too. Emily pushed the bomber into the first and it hesitated, the engine and transmission doing that little game of chicken her car was known for. She punched the accelerator, giving herself and the blue import the swift kick in the ass both of them needed. There were no chickens here, not anymore. The old man could do his worst. She would take it in stride, a big, fat slice of Mom's home cooking on her painted black lips. Speaking of which, Mom had better have something in the oven. Her baby was coming home and she was hungry. She was very hungry and had exactly 0 patience for bullshit. The bomber rolled to a stop along the street. It had to. The driveway was full. In its entirety of her time living with them, Emily had never seen the driveway full. Yet here it was, resplendent in cars. Dad would be pissed. Dad is dead. The suddenness of the words hit her faster than she expected. The old man was dead. There was no other reason for this many cars. Emily pulled her phone out, only now realizing that she'd blocked Mom. The old man was dead. He had to be. She could leave. She could drive away and it wouldn't matter. Emily could have done that, but she didn't. She pulled the keys out of the ignition, then made her way through a sea of bumper-stickered vehicles. These were Dad's people, and they proclaimed it proudly from the back end of their cars and from those hazy rear windows. Fuck your feelings. Pronouns are for pussies. Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Emily shook her head at that last one. Adam and Steve might have saved the whole lot of us a whole mess of trouble. Some days she wondered if it wouldn't have been better if the whole human race hadn't gotten started in the first place. The house looked exactly like she remembered it, which wasn't saying much. Dad had built it way back on the lot and practically nestled it against a stretch of wild brush he'd never tried to contain. God's country, he used to call it. It was an overgrown mess of whatever had seen fit to grow in that forever damp muck behind the house. If there was a god, Emily was pretty sure he had zero interest in what lived in the country Dad had named after it. Long tree limbs like black legs of some hairy spider stretched out over the roof, dripping Spanish moss across the moldy tiles. Even early in the afternoon, with the benefit of the full sun, God's country looked hazy and hard to follow. It was a testament to what was truly important in the old man's life. His radio. Even before the forest had started to consume it, the house had never been much to look at. It was little 3-2 the old man had bought back when regular people could buy houses, back before corporations and vacation rentals ate the world. The siding was warped in spots, and windows that should have been reasonably clear were anything but. In fact, the whole place felt like it had been wrapped in gauze and left to fester. That's what it was, an old wound. Emily stopped at the door. Her fingers reached for the knob, but hung up somewhere between her pocket and the cold metal. Tiny webs hung in the dark corners of the overhang, their pea-sized alien occupants hard at work wrapping flies that had ventured too close. It wasn't too late. She could get in the car and leave. The bomber wouldn't mind. It'd be just as happy on the highway as sitting on the street edge. No. She was here, and she would see this through. It felt weird to knock, but that's what she did, holding her breath for what came next. You're doing this for Mom. You're doing all of this for Mom. Emily was, but it wasn't Mom who answered the door.
Who the hell are you?
The woman couldn't have been more than 5 foot tall, and that was with heels on. She somehow managed to squeeze her piggies into those 2 strappy numbers and not blown out an ankle in the process. At least not yet, anyway. The afternoon was young. I'm Jay's daughter. Oh, Mercifully, the big woman never got to finish her sentence, as it was cut off by an even larger gentleman in his beard.
Oh, fuck, it's Emily. Shit. How you doing? It's been like forever.
It had been like forever, but Miller hadn't changed. She'd never gotten his last name, but the round specimen of unfocused anger from next door remained entirely unchanged. He was still doing very little to hide the pride tattoos. That sort that would have gotten his ass kicked in another part of town, but somehow went over just fine here. Yeah, it has. Listen, is my mom...
Yeah, Charlotte's here. Shit, girl. This is a wake. Everybody's here.
And drunk. It didn't take long to count them all off. Miller and Strappy Shoes were just the first. The living room had become a rogues gallery of all the old man's hits, all the people Dad shared his hate with. There were the Edgerton twins from 2 streets over, the ones that specialized in making sure the hate-filled newsletters made their rounds. By the time she'd left, they'd moved on to new media. The internet was sufficiently full of vitriol these days, so it only made sense they'd end up there. The sharp smell of Italian sausage wrinkled her nose, and she knew who it would be without even looking. For a man that hated just about everyone, Dad had always had a soft spot for Alfonso and his pizza. The elder statesman in the family dining business was long dead, but his grandson had taken over the place by the time Emily had left. And there he was, Alex. The important thing was that they didn't make eye contact, because she wasn't positive she'd be able to keep herself from breaking his jaw. Just because he had something between his legs doesn't mean the whole of womankind needed to worship it. Last she recalled, he'd end up with Marcy, and Emily was pretty sure his new wife had told him she was a virgin when they'd met. Well, it was certainly territory no man had gone before. Emily slipped past the pizza man and into the kitchen, where she found more members of her late father's entourage. There was Stinky Paul from the sewer treatment plant. The man could throw a mean dart and was more than happy to explain just which race had ruined the world, provided you got him drunk enough. Behind him was a gaggle of a woman, most of them old enough to be the groupies that hung on Dad's every word. But past them was exactly who held her attention. Mom. She hadn't aged a day, not in all the time Emily had been gone. She was still the same woman, the same mom. The oven light popped off, and without thinking, her mother pulled a tray off the stovetop and stuffed it in there. Sure, Alex had brought pizza, but Mom would do more. Mom always did more.
Emily.
The old woman with her silvery strands practically stuffed Stinky Paul in the sink in an effort to get to her daughter.
Emily, you came. Your father, he's...
I know, Mom. I know. The wake ran long, late into the evening. It was what the old man would have wanted, but managed to raise her blood pressure just the same. With the last of them out of the driveway clear, it wasn't long before Mom set to cleaning. Emily grabbed a rag from the sink and ran it over the table. I don't know why you put up with them.
They're your dad's friends. He would have wanted it this way.
Outside, the sun had long since set. The house's glow casting long and spindly shadows over God's country. Dad was gone. Now all that was left was to clean up his mess. Dad's dead.
I know, dear.
Emily's mom handed her a new rag and dumped the soiled one in the sink.
So, how's Jinx?
A lot like Dad.
Oh no. What happened?
And so began the sordid tale. Emily told herself she wasn't going to do it, that she wasn't going to tell her mom, but it felt impossible not to. This was just who Mom was. When she got you talking, you'd be hard-pressed to stop. We moved in together. Emily dropped that bomb with the practiced grace of a girl who knew how to rile you up. She'd done it so many other times before, gauging their reaction so as to know what side of the fence to put them on. Mom's not like that. Somehow, Emily knew, but she played her game just the same.
It didn't work out. Moving in together can be hard. What with the things people say and all.
You mean the things Dad said? Emily squeezed the rag with a little more strength than she meant to. Yeah, that didn't help. That didn't help at all.
I hate that people did that to you, sweetheart.
Then why'd you let him do that to me? Emily banged the rag on her hand against the table. Why'd you let him do it all those years? Why did you fucking let Miller in your house? Or Stinky Paul? Or that fat bitch at the door? Why was Alex here? Why did you let Dad run your life? Mom got quiet, her hands in her laps and folded.
I always support the people in my life. The ones that support me.
Support? Emily left the rag on the table and threw her hands in the air. Support? You call letting your daughter leave support? You call letting him say those things? Those fucking terrible things about me? Support? The wind picked up outside, rattling the trees behind the house, and the heavy moss that hung from them like thick spider webs.
I can only do what I can do. I can listen. I can be here now. I'll be here for you now, sweetheart.
Whatever. I'll be gone by morning. You won't need to support me ever again, and you won't need to see me either. Emily wasn't exactly sure how she ended up in her dad's old office, but by the time she'd realized she didn't have a hotel reservation, it was too late to make one. It's just one night. The old man's desk faced the window, giving him a great view of God's country. A fat microphone dangled above the sea of weathered pine and angry papers. Cords dripped off the steel beast, twisting in thick coils like rattlesnakes sunning themselves on a cloudless day. A soundboard of switches and knobs coated in a thin layer of dust sat not far away, and from there, the masterpiece of local radio engineering devolved into something she didn't understand. That was his world, not hers. Emily grabbed a few boxes off the couch in the corner, dumping their contents without a moment's hesitation. Photos streamed out, skipping across the floors like tiles from some memory game. She told herself not to look, not to pick them up, but she did anyway. Dad in his younger years stared back at her, the man in his prime, hungry and ready to attack life. That was a time before she'd known him, before she'd come into his life and, in his words, ruined it. She tossed that one aside, and then the next. It was a cavalcade of history and photo paper glory. There was the house when he'd first built it and the tiny forest behind it. There was Mom, young and beautiful, with those long tresses forever tinged in silver. With each passing image, God's country grew bigger. It ate the lawn, then the swing set, and even the kiddie pool that she could barely remember them owning. They were all lost to God's country, just like the house even now.
Knock, knock.
Emily tossed the photos on the desk. I'm asleep.
Oh, don't be silly. I made you some coffee.
Mom pushed her way in, setting the mug on the desk directly in the ring that had been left for it. I'm not Dad. I don't want your coffee.
That's fine, dear. I don't mind. It's there if you want it. Are those pictures of your father? If you want to keep them, you can. I have so many. He loved being in pictures.
Dad loved telling people what they did wrong. Dad loved being larger than life. I don't want pictures of that asshole. Emily pushed the box away with her foot. I told you, I don't miss him. I hated him. I think I still hate him.
He was a passionate one. I'll give you that.
Mom took a seat on the couch, perching on the edge like she was hanging on her daughter's every word. It wasn't hard for Emily to imagine her here all those nights while he was broadcasting, listening to that filth, supporting him. Passionate? He was a bigot and a jerk.
He just had a big personality. You know, there's a lot of him in you.
Emily practically exploded like she'd strapped firecrackers to her chest. I'm nothing like Dad. Nothing.
Oh, of course not, dear. You have your head on right.
You're damn straight I do. Her mother nodded, pointing to the desk and the microphone sitting on top of it. Beyond the window, God's country stirred gently, a soft breeze tugging on its limbs and making the dangling moss dance.
It's too bad, you know. The world needs more people like you.
What? You mean people that aren't idiots? Her mother nodded, the old woman's fingers twisting around each other quietly in her lap.
Passionate people. People that care. You care.
I do. I care a fuck ton more than he did. I care about people, good people. Mom smiled and popped off the couch, turning her attention to one of those many boxes on the desk and fiddling with their knobs.
I think I remember how to set it up.
Mom, I'm not doing his radio show. I'm not. Those people are sick. They are fucked up. I'm not talking to them.
Then don't.
Her mother's eyes lit up when the lights flipped on.
Talk to your people. Tell them the message they need to hear.
What they need to hear. Was there another jinx out there? Someone who needed to know those hate-filled people were wrong? There are too many assholes out there. There were, but maybe that was the point. Maybe it was time to swing back. There was a hate out there, a hate beyond the glass and God's country. It wasn't getting smaller, it was getting larger. It was spreading across the country like a malignant tumor and needed to be stopped. Mom grabbed the microphone and pulled it close, then pressed it into her hands, the cold metal strangely invigorating in the dim transmitter's light. Mom, I can't. I don't know the first thing about. The old woman put a finger to her daughter's lips.
You know exactly what to say. You're just like your father. You know what to say because it comes from your heart. Just tell them what they need to hear. Speak your truth.
Emily pulled the microphone close and hesitated. Her mother guided her into the chair and whispered gently as she sat.
Think of Jinx. Think of her listening. Tell her what she needs to hear. Tell them what they all need to hear.
Emily did exactly that. She unloaded. She unloaded so many years' worth of pent-up anger and resentment. She shared her truth, her passion, and every bit of fire that came with it. Before long, she had the coffee cup in hand like a practiced pro and was spinning the story exactly as her father had. Except this story was different. The story was right. Her daughter never noticed the second set of hands, or the third and fourth, fingers slid off in favor of black and hairy legs. She clutched that sweet child's shoulders, steadying a stiff neck to accept her venom. Fangs blossomed like buds in the spring, injecting the poison deep. She is so like her father. 8 hairy limbs skittered across the office, then down the stairs, leaving an empty shell of fleshy humanity on the landing. Her daughter wouldn't notice. She wouldn't see anything. She was too blind to it now. Emily had her truth, and that was all that mattered. The spider pushed open the back door and stretched her legs out into God's country. Her children were there, too many to count. They hid in the eaves, under fallen logs, and in the dense moss. They were there, and they were hungry. She would feed them. The radio waves would travel far and wide, to places her silken strands never could reach. Truth was fleeting, but hate was forever.
Well, Dark Valiants, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to know what happens next, well, I guess you're going to have to stick around till next month, won't you? This episode, God's Country, was written by Martin Shannon. Our narrator and the voice of Emily was, of course, our own Rosie Knuckles. Iriska Redding and Gorath Hyun participated in other voices within the episode. Our audio engineer on this episode is Michael Glassel. Our producer is Jonathan Capers, and our art was, of course, made by Brandon McCamey. If you like this show, we have many more like it on our Patreon page, such as Missing, Frozen Dread, and Numbers. Make sure to go check it out. And if you want to read more of things written by the wonderful Martin Shannon, go to martin-shannon.com. The link is down in the description. Thank you for listening.